There are many unknowns in the NFL world.
Why didn't Malcolm Butler play in the Super Bowl against the Eagles?
You know, everyone asked me this. My friends asked me this. Whoever asked me this, I actually know less info than you guys.
There is always something to be paying attention to when it comes to the NFL. So, let's take a look back at 10 of the craziest unsolved mysteries in NFL history, starting off in the nation's capital with one of the most controversial stories in recent memory. This started back in July of 2020 when Dan Snyder, the team's owner, announced he was commissioning an investigation into the team's workplace environment. Now, if you think that having policemen investigate fellow officers may come with potential conflicts of interest, then you will understand why the NFL swiftly took over the investigation in August of that year.
The NFL is taking over an independent investigation into the Washington football team. Owner Dan Snyder says the league is going to have full oversight of the workplace conduct review.
The only problem is, the NFL also has a vested interest in maintaining the value of its franchises and perhaps more so, protecting the wider reputation of the league. So, in true NFL fashion, they found a scapegoat and seemingly buried much of the investigation. We all now know that John Gruden doesn't always use the best choice of words behind closed doors. What a shocker! Out-of-touch football coach uses insensitive slurs and doesn't have the most progressive mindset. I, for one, would have never believed this. But what else was going on behind closed doors in Washington? We already know that Snyder was basically forcing the team's cheerleaders to work for free as a personal escort service for him and his billionaire buddies. But how much uglier did it get in DC? Unfortunately, we may never truly know. Staying in the NFC East, with a mystery that is somehow even more bizarre than whatever it is that happened in Washington. This one dates back a while to the late 1980s when the Italian mob was still at the peak of its powers, running amok in the greater tri-state area. The AP released a report that cited a quote-unquote freelance hitman who told Playboy magazine that after Jimmy Hoffa was killed, he was buried near the end zone in Giant Stadium. Federal investigators have tried to downplay the rumor, but rather suspiciously, when the old Giant Stadium got torn down, a spokesperson for the FBI's office announced that the Bureau had no intentions to be involved with the demolition. It sounds kind of insane to me, like the FBI didn't want to be involved and settle the mystery once and for all. Oh well, I guess at least an epic NFL mystery lives on, I guess. Alright, still staying in the NFC East, there are a couple of great mysteries that have come out of the Dallas Cowboys organization. I suppose that really shouldn't be much of a surprise with a lunatic like Jerry Jones at the helm. But anyways, first we have the first real reason behind Jones and legendary coach Jimmy Johnson's infamous fight, which ended up in Johnson's shocking departure from Dallas. Whatever happened, it must have been really bad because Jones and Johnson were former college teammates and very good friends. And now, even decades later, Johnson, one of the team's best coaches ever, is still not in the Cowboys' Ring of Honor.
It seems very petty of what's going on between you and Jimmy from the standpoint that he's not in that Ring of Honor.
I get to make that decision, and it isn't at the end of the day all tailored around whether Jimmy's snibbling or not.
It has since been reported that most of the feud relates back to a massive power struggle and really a fit of credit grabbing that ultimately led to backstabbing and the duo's subsequent divorce. I don't know about you, but I suspect there was a little more to that spat than the two alpha males jockeying for a pat on the back from the public following their roles in the revival of the Dallas Cowboys. Maybe something involving significant others, or maybe a card game gone wrong. I mean, something had to be the catalyst. It just seems impossible that they would punt on trying to continue their league-wide reign of terror together. Controversy is just always swirling around the boys. For the younger generation of Cowboys fans, it was the potential existence and disappearance of the Dez Bryant tapes. The incident in question took place in 2015, in the aftermath of the Ray Rice video being released. A rumor then spread like wildfire, both online and in the media, that a tape existed of the star wide receiver committing an atrocity that was 5 times worse than the Ray Rice video. But there is a story that all the major insiders know about. It involves a videotape, and I don't know that it exists. From that point on, the rumors spread like crazy. People supposed that this incident was the reason that the Cowboys hadn't yet signed the young star to a long-term extension. Schefter even came out and said that he knew what was on it, just he hadn't seen it yet. This was just non-stop, especially once TMZ got involved. Ultimately, nothing ever came out of it. Dez denies that it existed, and no one has proven otherwise. But that only leads to more questions. Was there ever a tape? If so, who made sure that it never got to the public? And how? And why? Let's shift gears to another organization that is reviled across the league. The New England Patriots. Now, rather unsurprisingly, there are a handful of mysteries that have risen from the fog in Foxborough. Most recently, the bizarre unannounced benching of former Super Bowl hero Malcolm Butler during the subsequent big game in 2018. A decision that prompted an onslaught of questions from the media, particularly after the Pats' defense surrendered 41 points in a shocking loss to the Eagles. Leading up to that game, it was known that the Patriots' defensive back was dealing with an illness, but there were never any indications that he wouldn't play. Neither Butler nor Belichick really gave us anything to work with during any of their media appearances that we got from them in the time following that loss. One rumor was that Butler had been late to a pre-game meeting. Another suggested that the two had gotten into it during a practice session, and Bill decided to punish him. Some simply believe that New England did it strategically as a surprising chess move. Things only heated up after Tom Brady showed his public support for Butler, albeit on the defensive back's Instagram post. But people started to basically believe that Butler and Brady were essentially leading a contingency against the team's longtime coach. And though both individual players have since parted ways with New England, no one has ever really provided clarity as to why Bill Belichick, of all people, might have made such a puzzling decision in such an important moment. While we're on the subject of the now well-known rift between Brady and Belichick, how about Deflategate? Perhaps the most spectacular and most over-scrutinized event on this list. For anyone who is lucky enough to be living under a rock for this entire scandal, New England found itself in the midst of another cheating scandal after it was found out that the game balls had been slightly deflated below the standards set for league compliance. This all took place during the AFC Championship game, and shortly after, chaos ensued. It became a massive to-do. Who deflated the footballs? Who knew about it? Does any of this really matter? Sadly, we only really got an answer to the last question, and that answer was a resounding no. Though Brady was suspended for 4 games, and the organization was fined and docked a draft pick, ultimately, the biggest implication of the scandal was the fuel that it poured on the flames of the star quarterback's relationship with Bill Belichick. In the time since, neither Brady nor Belichick have confessed to being involved, but considering how the Pats were run in those days, it seems impossible that anything football-related could have gone down without at least one of the two signing off on it. So, until one of them eventually cashes in on a tell-all book or documentary, the questions around who's actually pulling the string behind the scenes on this operation will remain a mystery. It is worth noting that part of the intrigue around the scandal in New England stemmed from all the previous allegations against the Patriots for cheating. And their first big scandal, Spygate, as it has come to be known, may have been the catalyst for another one of Belichick's highly publicized football divorces. The falling out he had with Eric Mangini, a former assistant coach whom Belichick had really taken to and mentored closely during his time in New England. Seth Wickersham reported that the two got into a fistfight over the scandal at the league meetings in 2008. So, while we may never know the gory details, it seems to be a safe assumption that these two men are not making up anytime soon. Speaking of people who aren't going to make up, how about 2 major NFC fallouts in recent memory? First, what happened with Percy Harvin in Seattle? Our younger fans might not know, but there was a time, albeit a brief one, where Percy Harvin was one of the most explosive playmakers in the league. So it was a pretty big deal when it was announced shortly before Super Bowl 48 that Harvin and Golden Tate, another key offensive contributor, had gotten into a fight the week of the big game. Harvin had since taken responsibility for the altercation, which, considering he supposedly punched then teammate Golden Tate in the face, is a sign of growing maturity. But he's been rather opaque about what actually went down between the two. Or how about the fallout between Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy in Green Bay a few years back? The duo won won a Super Bowl together. And seemingly in lockstep, they led one of the most consistent offenses in the league for like a decade. And then, almost out of nowhere, there seemed to be mounting tension between Coach McCarthy and his quarterback. The feud escalated year over year until the relationship eventually became unsalvageable, and Roger basically pushed his longtime coach out of town. Now, the general consensus is that the two had differing opinions on how the offense could and should be ran. Apparently, it was not uncommon for McCarthy to call something and Rodgers to completely hijack the play call in the huddle. But it remains unclear what else was at foot behind the scenes. Last but not least, we have the tragedy of George Atkinson. The former special teamer had lived the dream. He went from an undrafted free agent to a member of the Oakland Raiders, then bounced around the league for a few seasons, making appearances for a number of teams. Atkinson ultimately flamed out of the league at the end of 2018. The story, though, gets a whole lot darker, because that very year, he lost his twin brother on Christmas to suicide. And then, a year later, Atkinson himself passed away under mysterious circumstances, leaving behind a young daughter. And no one seems to know how. To this day, there has not been a final cause of his death that has been announced. A tragedy, absolutely, but another crazy NFL mystery nonetheless. But which do you think is the craziest unsolved NFL mystery? Did we miss anything? Join us in the comment section below. If you like this video and learned a thing or two, clicking the like button helps out a ton, and hey, we appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, subscribing is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.